Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here. Sorry for the delayed beginning. Just had a lot of stuff I had to take care of today with this impending storm, and it's keeping us very, very busy. Let me caution everybody right off the bat because I know a lot of you have access or have looked at a number of different weather models and what they have to offer with respect to snowfall accumulations, among other things. I would be really careful in looking at those maps and making a literal interpretation of how much snow is going to fall. I'm tending to lean more toward the maps that are labeled as positive change or positive snow growth maps because they take into account mixing or sleet or any one of a number of factors that could hold accumulations down. And as always, with these types of systems, you wind up really struggling in terms of trying to figure out how things are. Let me how things are going to turn out. Let me right off the bat just make a couple of comparisons with respect to the nor'easter from the end of last week, which, by the way, continues to exert an influence on weather along the northeast and mid-Atlantic coast because the circulation of the storm is sitting to the northeast of Bermuda and just continues to spin around and sit there, thanks to that wonderful blocking pattern that we're in. This storm is going to be a little bit different in that it won't achieve the same level of intensity in terms of pressure that the other storm did, probably getting down into the mid-980s, which is formidable, but it's not like the system from last week, which saw pressures down around 970. I think that the winds with this are going to be strong along the immediate coast, where there could be certainly gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour, but I got my fingers crossed that we don't see anything much more extreme than that. I also do not think that the actual extent of the circulation of the storm in terms of the impact of the wind, which in Friday's event went all the way back west for 150 miles or more, I think in this instance, the strongest winds are going to be confined mainly to the immediate coastal areas. So that at least will be a plus. As far as assessing what this may or may not do, remember that everything has been somewhat compromised from the last storm in terms of trees, power lines, and so on. Now, you could argue that the last storm was so fierce that whatever dead trees that were around that were vulnerable came down. And that you may wind up with less this time around from that respect. On the other hand, that storm may have made trees that were not vulnerable then vulnerable now, in which case we have to worry about that. So let's assume that from the standpoint of potential here with regards to disruptions and trees down, et cetera, that's something I really can't predict very well, obviously, but why don't we assume that there is going to be some additional impact here from that respect and use some common sense and go from there. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to show you at least what's going on this evening with extent of the watches and warnings. Now, the low that is coming out of the plains is producing a large area of winter storm warnings up for the Dakotas and in through most of Minnesota except the Northeast. We have winter weather advisories extending back eastward across most of the state of just about all of the state of Wisconsin. We also have winter weather advisories across northern Iowa into parts of Nebraska, but then in that orange area you see there, those are blizzard warnings, and in the yellows, in the yellowish area, that's all high wind warnings. In the meantime, out in the wind advisories, out in the west, it's very, very quiet for the most part. In the east, of course, in anticipation of all this, we have winter storm watches that were extended late this afternoon, further west and south into much of eastern and southeastern Pennsylvania, back to a western edge to about Harrisburg. Also extended south into southwestern New Jersey and down to about Route 195, which cuts the state in half from east to west. And then we have watches the rest of the way northward through northern New Jersey, Long Island, New York City, just about all of New England, and most of the eastern half of New York State. We still also are dealing with some additional coastal flooding issues from Delaware on up into southern New England, and we have coastal flood advisories up for that area. Now, this is what I did with snow amounts. This is my first call. I decided to go conservative here for a number of reasons. The potential is certainly here that I could be way too low. But for now, I'm thinking I put a general coastal band of three to 6 for Long Island, except 1 to 3 in the extreme east, and 1 to 3 for southeastern New England, 1 to 3 for coastal New Jersey and into southern New Jersey, 3 to 6 once you go west and north of the Garden State Parkway. And if you draw a line from Atlantic City or just north of Atlantic City, say westward, you start to get into some 3 to 6 inch bands, which I have back through Philadelphia, on up through eastern Pennsylvania, and then in the purple, marking the back edge of what should be at least 6 inches plus. Certainly, I could have gone with a range of 6 to 12 here, but again, I decided that for now, the best course for me is to just kind of play it a little bit conservative. I'm not really so worried about the inland areas getting those snow amounts. I think those will be at least at the very bottom. I still, I have concerns with the coast in terms of mixing, if it does or doesn't happen. My general feeling on this is that this coastal storm is going to trend more east-northeast rather than being tucked in along the coast and kind of gravitating its way up northward, so that, if I'm correct on that, this will create a colder solution near the coast, and it might skew more snow than anything else. But bear in mind that the atmosphere this time around is significantly colder, especially in the upper air, and we do have some very strong dynamics at play here. So there will be, I believe there will be additional dynamic cooling that is going to occur through all of this. Now, as a comparison, let me bring up what the Weather Service is doing, because they are being rather aggressive in some areas here, going for north and west of 195, 6 to 8, 8 to 12, up through northwestern New Jersey, even some pockets of 12 to 18 when you go into northeastern Pennsylvania. I have to tell you, right now, I don't know that I could be that comfortable going with that. Certainly models are generating enough liquid precipitation in those areas that get into the cold air that those high-end amounts are certainly possible, but I really want to just kind of cautiously wait for at least a few more runs of weather models just to be sure. The place where I think you could wind up with the bigger error will be south of 195 and east of New York City over Long Island, where, again, will there be mixing issues or won't there be mixing issues? And I think that is the big question. I think you could make arguments, valid arguments, in both instances for either one being correct at this point. You could certainly look at this and say, well, there should be enough warming at the low and mid levels to change it over to rain along the immediate coast. Then you could also say, well, look what just happened last week with hardly any cold air and just dynamics, and we were able to see a large area that changed over to snow in areas where a number of weather models were not seeing that changeover and calling for rain. Here's the National Weather Service's view from Upton, which is in central Long Island, so they're responsible for New York City and these areas, and you can see what they're doing for Long Island, from as little as 1 to 2 in Montauk to the higher amounts in northern Nassau and northwest Suffolk in a 6 to 8 band. I don't think this is unreasonable. 3 to 4 in central Long Island at Islip. New York City in a 6 to 8 band, 8 to 12 when you start to get into northeastern New Jersey, and then on up the Hudson Valley and north and east from there in through Connecticut. You start to go into southeastern Connecticut, the numbers go lower. I'll bring up Albany's, and let me bring them up so we can see what they're doing with respect to the rest of the Hudson Valley. And remember, you go up in this range, a lot of these areas here just picked up anywhere from 18 to 30 inches in some places. So basically running 8 to 12 east of the Hudson, 12 to 18 west of the Hudson, amounts 6 to 8 or 8 to 12 once you get north of north of Albany, up into the Adirondacks. 12 to 18 in southern Vermont, 12 to 18 in northwestern Connecticut, and on up into western Massachusetts. Again, not unreasonable. It's a little easier for those areas because if they tap the precip, the values that the models are giving out, and they're definitely going to be cold enough, I would think that those amounts will be achievable without too much difficulty. So at this stage of the game, I'm going to jump over. We're going to start with the late afternoon NAM model run here. And we'll come into it a little bit closer. We'll bring the eastern region up. So there's your primary low in southwestern Minnesota, the large area of snow with that. You can see the coastal storm east of the Carolinas looking like it's sitting just north of Bermuda by about a little less than 100 miles. That just continues to rotate around and around. Again, all of this being blocked by the big upper high and surface high that is covering the eastern half of Canada. So your surface low drops into Iowa, and you start to see some energy in the form of some showers and thunderstorms moving through into the southeastern part of the United States. So this is where your secondary low is going to take shape and develop. The primary gets into Ohio. It drops into southeastern Ohio, and then you start to see the secondary development along the Carolina coast, and then your secondary low takes over during early Wednesday morning. Now, there's a lead area of snow that the model is indicating up the coast. Not 100% sure about that yet. Might be rushing things. Sometimes the NAM likes to do that. Also, it would not be a total shock to me if areas a little bit further north than what the NAM is indicating, like around Long Island and in and around New York City perhaps, and down to about Route 195, that you could get some of this starting off as rain while the precipitation is light enough until you get into that dynamic cooling, and then you start to really get that cold air to work in. And that's what the NAM does. As we move into Wednesday, we have the low sitting off the Delaware coast, and you can see what happens during the morning into early afternoon. That's when the storm intensifies and you get this blossoming area of heavy snow. Note that the NAM on this run has decided to bring that cold air with the dynamic cooling down through all of New Jersey into eastern PA and all the way down into northern Delaware, northeastern Maryland. The upper dynamics are impressive. We can show you at the upper air here this negatively tilted trough from the Great Lakes to Virginia. I mean, this is a really strong arm of energy that's swinging around, and the bottom of that trough cuts off, and it cuts off rather vigorously. This is going to be key here. If it cuts off like that, and you get that surface low gets kind of tucked in under the upper low, where it's offshore, rather than having a broader look where the surface low is more tucked in closer to the coast, this is where you could wind up with snow through all the coastal areas, and then that upper low just kind of pivots up and around towards southeastern New England as we move into early Thursday morning. The models are all fairly similar with this look. We can pull up the GFS at that level, and you can see that it's not that different. Perhaps the NAM probably cuts it off a little faster and a little more vigorous. The compact nature of this storm would basically tighten up the cold air aloft, would become tighter around the center, so you wouldn't get the warming that you would normally get along the immediate coast. The GFS is very borderline with this idea. So the NAM's idea of this upper low vigorously cutting off is key. The European model, by the way, also more in the NAM's camp really than the GFS, with a colder look to it, and unfortunately we can't see what goes on in between, which would be really important. But it does wind up with a low cutoff east of Cape Cod, and when I looked at the surface lows, the surface low is actually a little bit further to the east than most of the other models. This would argue for mostly snow for even the coastal areas. So if this winds up being the case, if the models are consistent with this overnight and tomorrow morning, I may wind up upping amounts. Now, the RGEM model today was pretty aggressive. with regards to the dynamics playing out with some hefty developments of precip. You can see it isn't often that you see these dark blues show up in what it thinks the radar presentation is going to be, and it's showing bands of heavy snow developing in eastern Pennsylvania right up to about New York City and into western Long Island, and you can see it here. That low's a little more tucked in on the RGEM run today, but anybody that gets into that darker blue, if the RGEM is correct, is going to get into some heavy snow and heavy snow rates, and you can see that area expands when we move through the afternoon into the evening, and then the low starts to translate eastward, moving into tomorrow night. That's as far out as it goes. So whoever gets under those strong dynamics is going to wind up getting a fairly hefty snowfall, and above what I'm showing here with regards to outcome. I'll even again be very careful when you look at these snow maps. First, I'll show you the RGEM's snow map. In fact, better yet, let's look at the accumulated precip, because at least this justifies what could fall as snow. And the lighter blues, if you look on the scale on the side, I'll bring it up a little higher so you can see it better. The lighter blues, you start to get into melted liquids of 1.5 inches, and the white areas, you're talking 2 inches plus. And that's actually very impressive for a system like this. You can see that the nature of this is also a bit more compact. The winds, which will be important for coastal areas, we do have the yellow is sustained gales touching New Jersey and Long Island along the coast. I'll back it up. You can at least get a flavor for when this wind picks up. So during the day Wednesday, it gets very windy along the New Jersey coast and over Long Island, particularly the South Shore and over the East End. This is also going to set up another round of coastal flooding issues, perhaps more for Long Island than for New Jersey, because of the fact that the wind may turn more northwesterly over time in New Jersey a bit sooner, and that'll help push water out, at least on the ocean side, not so much on the bay side, but something we're going to have to watch closely with the tides. At least we're coming away from that full moon from last Thursday, so that buys us a little bit of a positive here. The RGEM snow map. This is straight 10-to-1 ratio, folks. So you got to be really cautious. In fact, let me come back here 1 second. This is the snow that it's producing across the plains and the Midwest. This is in addition to whatever's already fallen. And the RGEM only going out to Wednesday evening, but you can see this pocket of big snow that it does. Now, this is based on a 10-to-1 ratio and would suggest, you'd have to assume that every flake that falls sticks. I don't know that that's going to be the case. So we might want to certainly cut those amounts back. If you like the idea of the RGEM's view of this, you might cut those back by about a third. One other model to look at is the high resolution RGEM, which only goes out 48 hours. So this only takes us into Wednesday afternoon, and it shows a fairly large area of 6 inches plus. Here's the tight view. So this is, again, only through Wednesday afternoon. I think this is actually not unreasonable. If assuming that you don't get the mixing issues to penetrate too far inland, this is certainly a workable map for me. And you still have another 6 to 8 hours worth of snow to go to put on top of these amounts. The surface view of this model also pretty impressive with the surface low, and it has it actually snowing, if you believe it. It actually has some snow breaking out before midnight tomorrow night, but the lead snow is probably mostly more on the light side. It's the snow from the developing coastal low here that is the important, what's really important. And excuse me, it has heavy snow in draw a line, I think from just south of the Turnpike 95, north and west of there. Again, we can't see the second half of this, I would guess that you'll probably see, if the low is pulling out to the east or east-northeast, that the areas that are shown to be raining here would be changing over to snow during the afternoon on Wednesday into Wednesday night. The GFS, there's your snow, mostly snow from New York City westward through it. So the GFS actually has turned a little bit colder here on this late afternoon run, and it's snowfall. And I'm going to look at the positive. The positive change, I think, is the one that you really want to use, and it actually would line up better with what I'm forecasting in terms of snow amounts than some of the other models. The pink and white would be 6 to 10, and you see there's variation here. Lesser amounts, under 6 for coastal areas, well under 6 when you go south of 195. Not an unreasonable solution if you wind up with that rain-snow line pivoting westward just to about New York City. The positive snow growth on the NAM model. And again, remember, the NAM is going to be more aggressive with precip amounts. So the pinkish, the purplish pink areas, you could probably say that would be the southern edge of 6. And you've got some bigger amounts as you head up into the Hudson Valley and on up through much of New England except the immediate coast. Amazing pattern we're in, really, at any time of year. Now we're in March, which is, of course, at a time where the atmosphere becomes increasingly volatile because of the natural warming that's occurring with the increasing, the sun moving further and further north every day in terms of the sun angle strengthening. There's your block in eastern Canada, that finger that's pointing from the Atlantic across Newfoundland into eastern Canada. Now, what's going to be going on is that we're going to maintain some semblance of blocking in a negative NAO in through the rest of this week and through the weekend. So there is another system that's behind this that will be a player here early next week. So we may have a third in the game here. The PNA at this point is actually going positive. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Right now, the literal models would have this being taken out to our south, but I'll tell you something, judging from the way things have been, I wouldn't necessarily put that in the bank. And going on longer term, you still have some semblance of a negative NAO, at least for a while, although the trough comes back down in the west late in the period. But you know what? I just wanted to give that just a brief look. I'm not really spending a whole lot of time today with regards to the long range. I know a few of you have asked me, how about the Teleconnections? I haven't been putting them up. Well, we've had so much going on. I've been kind of putting these on the back burner, but at least through today, you can see that NAO very strongly negative, stays negative in through mid-month, then is shown to go positive. I wonder about that. The PNA is negative, then positive, then negative, so it goes positive, and the NAO is negative early next week with the potential for the second one. The EPO goes strongly positive and then trends down toward the neutral line late in the period, but I think right now the signature of the NAO is so strong that it really is the dominating feature here. So probably not going to pay too much attention to that EPO at this point. So I'm going to come back up here at the front of the screen, bring myself up at the top here. It's amazing. My hair is getting grayer and grayer as we go along. Hang on one second. Not quite understanding why this is shut off, but for some reason it is. Okay, so why don't we take a look at I'm going to take a look at some of what you guys have to say tonight, as we do every night. Thunder snow, Charlie Baker, is not out of the question with all those very strong dynamics. Vertical motions are going to be very strong, and in some places off the wall, and with that deepening low nearby, don't be too surprised. Again, Reaver, try not to get too overworked, over-focused on what the models are showing. There's still too much variability here. Gary Vessis, you're up in western Passaic County. You've got no problems there. With this one, this should be all snow. And yeah, the block clearly was not a bust. I think people that were calling that, a lot of the people that were referring to the block as a quote, a bust, are those that aren't seeing immediate gratification. It doesn't work out. It doesn't work that way. As I've said many times, there are no, silver bullets or magic bullets here where, just because you have the block doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion that you want. The pattern change you get and the pattern change you want are almost always two different things. I don't know that we need to pay too much attention to the teleconnections at this point. The NAO is front and center. So let's kind of, I think that's basically right now driving everything. So until we get that to relax and other factors come into play, I think that's the one that we really have to focus on. Gary Kings Blank, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Just running along here. Well, winter not a bust after all. I never really considered it a bust personally. I mean, I have above normal snowfall where I am. Most of the area that I forecast for, including the New Jersey coast, has had above normal snow. This is the way it works around here. This is not Siberia. This is not northern Canada. This is the Northeast. And that means we have volatility. Always smiling. I hope your snow is melting away. Notice some warmer temperatures up your way, and that's a good thing. I appreciate it, YouTubers. I am having a good day. Thank you. Yes, I'll take a look at the GO 16. One of the things that one of my friends spoke to has a connection with someone who has a connection with someone that knows about the models, and was talking about the fact that the intensity that was driven by the other storm in terms of what was showing up on the satellite, there were a lot of these speckled clouds with the jet stream energy that was involved with all this. And this person's opinion that the models, the GFS model, was not handling that at all, and it was definitely having an impact on how cold the atmosphere is. So that could be one of the reasons why the GFS has been having a lot of trouble lately trying to figure out where the cold air and where the warm air is. And by the way, let me come back to the NAM for just a second. I want to just show you this time of year in March. You rely more and more on the situation aloft. I mean, you always rely on the situation aloft, obviously, but when you have a time of year where the temperatures on the ground are during the day are seldom below freezing, you have to really look at the colder air that lies above the surface and on up to the 5,000 foot level or the 850 millibar level. And I just want to show you here. This is, let me back up, because this is after the fact, but at least right now, the blue line that separates the blue from the green, that is where the freezing line is at the 5,000 foot level of the atmosphere. And you'll notice that as we move along into Wednesday morning, that zero gets very close on the NAM, but not quite to New York City. It's staying just offshore here. This is late Wednesday afternoon when the surface low is east of New Jersey. So all of this area here across New Jersey and southeastern New York below freezing at that level would support snow. And after this point, that's about the warmest it gets. And then the cold air begins to collapse going into early Wednesday evening as the low pulls away. So the upper air remains supportive even for the coast almost to the end. So you got to be really careful here when you talk about the cold layers of the atmosphere. The easterly isobars, as I forgot who mentioned it just now, might not mean an easterly surface wind. It may be more of a northeast wind, an 04 and 05 wind coming down from New England. And that is not going to be enough to warm things up, except maybe right at the beaches. Now here's the GFS, and even the GFS, I mean, it brings that zero line touching Long Island, but it never brings it back to New York City. So this is something you gotta watch very closely. The RGEM model for the close-up. I'm gonna see if we have. I think we have an 850 that we can look at. So even the RGEM, it brings warm air into southern New Jersey and into parts of the South Shore and eastern Long Island, but you can see that there's a cold pool in western Long Island and over New York City Wednesday afternoon. So I would suspect that right in there, that's probably where you're going to see your really heavy snow band if the RGEM plays out according to plan. So very, very interesting situation indeed. They're all learning experiences, folks. Believe me, and they can be hair pulling, gray hairing, and very frustrating. No doubt about it. So I'm going to leave you guys at this point now because I have to get ready for my other show. And at 9:15, the Joe Cioffi Show on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi. So be sure, if you can, tune into that. Reaver 501, thank you for banging on Super Chat there. Cigar for me. I really appreciate it very much. HOE Cuz, welcome aboard, by the way. I noticed that you're new on the video. Just trying to go back to your original point when you came on. I know you asked a question, and I just want to address it here. Can't seem to find it. I know it was way up near the front, so just give me a half a minute. And a big hello, happy birthday to Garrow, by the way, Vestus, Vetsus. Happy birthday to you, sir. Enjoy your steak dinner tonight, which you are headed for, if you're not heading for it already. I can't seem to find your question. I'm sorry. You know what? I apologize. So you get back to me on another time, and I'll probably do a video tomorrow. I'll probably do a live stream tomorrow morning. So be sure to check that out. Okay. Website posts are up on meteorologistjoecioffi.com. My buddy Angry Ben Scott just did an update for the New York City area, and you can check that out on nycweathernow.com. Have a great evening. See you on Facebook at 9:15. Otherwise, we'll see